Welcome back to episode 28 of the Baschamania podcast. I am your host, Justin Bash, and I am, per the usual, excited for today's guest. 2017 World Silver Medalist and 2020 Olympic hopeful Thomas Gilman stops by the show. Gilman has one of the biggest personalities in the sport, and I couldn't be more excited to have today's conversation with him. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe. Gilman is one of dozens and dozens of great guests on the show, and there's no shortage of entertainment. So if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to support the podcast, I'm selling a limited number of short and long sleeve Baschamania t-shirts. On the back, it says the first 25 with the last names of the first 25 guests. So send us a message on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever, and we'll get you hooked up with that. For now, let's get into today's show with Iowa Hawkeye, Thomas Gilman.
It's Baschamania! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when Baschamania runs wild on you? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, world silver medalist Thomas Gilman. How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, and I got so much I want to talk to you about. So I think it's best, let's go back to the beginning. Talk to me about how you got started wrestling.
I think just kind of like a lot of other guys, just through my father. My dad wrestled. Then it kind of, whatever your dad's into, he tries to get you into. So
Yep.
That's how I kind of got started.
And was it something that you knew right away you wanted to be good? Like I've seen the Flow film, The Love Me or Hate Me, and I want to pull from that in various spots. And for some people who haven't seen it and people who have, I know you said right away, like you wanted to be good at it. Where did that come from? When you're that young, I feel like sometimes it's hard to know if you're uber committed to something. You seemed super committed right away. What was it that got you super committed? And feeling like, I know you said right away you wanted to be an Olympic champ.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's a couple things. I think the first thing is just kind of like a childish kind of thing. It's a funny little story. But before I started wrestling, going to practice and stuff, my dad took me to a practice and, just go kind of see what was going on, see if I was even interested, And
Right.
I remember the coach had the guys lined up and they're doing double leg drills. And of course, you got to be a good partner. You double leg and then the other guy double legs.
Yep.
And so I looked at my dad. I said, yeah, I want to do this. I want to take guys down, but I don't know about getting taken down. I don't like, somebody tackling me.
Right.
And he looked at me, and I'll never forget. He said, well, just don't get taken down.
Like it's that easy, right?
Yeah. And I was like, all right, deal. Let's do it. So went back the next day and got on the mat, and the rest is history.
And I'm curious, when you're that young and like even from a childish standpoint of, okay, I did this, I want to be the best, and you obviously knew what a 20-year timetable would be to accomplish your dreams. How did you continue to get better, especially when you were young and you don't really have so many coaches and you don't kind of have what you have, let's say, in your 20s as resources? How did you level up so early on to continue to get better?
I think it was just a little bit of divine intervention, to be honest. Obviously I started wrestling, and I had a handful of coaches when I was little, and my dad, of course. And then I remember there's a point in my career, I can say that, where my dad was like, hey, I've taken you as far as I can. It's kind of time to turn you over to somebody
Right.
else. So we kind of started looking, around the local community for, better options as far as workout partners and coaches. And I came across Brad Hildebrandt, who was the head coach of Omaha Scott Catholic.
Yep.
If you know anything about wrestling in the Midwest, Coach Hildebrandt's the best. He ran a streak of, I think we went 13 years, but winning state titles consecutive. And so we hooked up with Brad, and Brad was a phenomenal coach and great mentor to me. And he had he wrestled in college D2 at UNO. Unfortunately, there's no longer a program there, but
Yeah.
He modeled a lot of his stuff off of Iowa here. So, he kind of developed me, physically, technically, and also, but more than that, mentally. So from there, it just kind of catapulted me from high school into college, and obviously everyone knows the history there with Tom and Terry Brands and Mark Perry now. So just kind of, I can't say it was all planned. It was just kind of one thing led to another, and there's a certain amount of divine intervention, I'd say.
And when you're young, I'm always curious because I feel like it's always a conversation, especially in the Olympic years, when what means the most, an Olympic, a world, or an NCAA championship. Did you have like a 1, 2, 3 out of those three, like starting when you were young on what you wanted to do? Like, where did the Olympic dream come from? Like, how young were you when that started?
As long as I can remember, so long ago, and I was so young that I remember, doing some shadow wrestling and stuff when I was real little, and I'd kind of go through these scenarios of how I would win the Olympics, and what I would do to celebrate and this and that. And it's kind of a funny thing to think about, but and I was so young that I wanted to win the Olympics in freestyle, Greco, and folk style. So I didn't even realize that it was, two styles. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, well, the folk style's not in the Olympics.
Right.
And so I kind of lost my focus in folk style a little bit for a few years. It's like I just wanted to wrestle freestyle and Greco. I was going to go the Henry Cejudo route. I was like, I don't need to go to college. I'm just going to do this. But yeah, it's definitely been number one was the Olympics. Yep. Obviously, I think for everybody that knows anything about the epitome of the sport, you want to be an Olympic champion first and foremost. Then second was a world champion, and third was NCAA champion. And not to take over the whole podcast, but I was telling the story the other day to somebody. In 17 after the national championship, I kind of had like a coming to Jesus moment. Like I'm never going to be an NCAA champion.
Yep.
That's never going to happen for me. So I had to figure out how to move forward from that. But then I was kind of going through some of my notes, my goal book and things like that. I never set a goal to be an NCAA champion.
Interesting.
Everything in my goals was I want to be a world Olympic champion. I want to be a world Olympic champion. So, I maybe lost track a little bit. Maybe it was immaturity. Now I know there's such thing as process and product goals.
Yep.
So maybe the NCAA champion was a process goal that I kind of overlooked. But, there's no looking back now. I got a world silver medalist. And, the next thing is Olympic gold. So that's what we're looking for now.
And, you mentioned a point that I want to kind of talk about a little later on, but we'll kind of use it as a launch pad for now. I think the story is fascinating with you saying, like, I'll never be an NCAA champion, coming to that realization and moving on right away, like not dwelling. There was no, like, time off. How did you maintain that proper perspective? And has that been something that's always been the strength of yours, to have that like proper perspective? Like, when did that start developing as you're going through your youth and middle school and high school career?
I think it's just having just good people around me.
Yep.
I've always kind of surrounded myself or attempted to surround myself with the best people. That started from day one. I have amazing parents, and I don't have the ideal childhood or the perfect childhood, but my parents did a lot for me and helped me develop a lot that way, and great grandparents, and they've always gave me good perspective and made me grateful for what I have, and so sometimes when things don't go your way, you got to kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, hey, you got to quit sucking your thumb.
Right.
It's going to come up tomorrow, and you got to get back to work. That's kind of been a theme of my life, kind of, just being I like to think of myself as a hard worker, and everyone around me is, hard worker, going to work with my grandpa, he's 82 years old and he's still working every day.
It's amazing.
So it's like, those are the people I looked up to. So if you're hurt or you're banged up or you're sick, it doesn't matter. You got to get up out of bed and you got to go to work. So, tying that into my wrestling and moving on from losses or things that didn't necessarily go my way, you lose or something happens, that sucks. You got to take your time to kind of be emotional about it and look it in the eye, but you got to take a step back and say, hey, world's still turning. You got to do your job, and whatever's next. The most, Tom Brand says it all the time. The most important thing is the thing that's right in front of us, the thing that's
Yep.
next. So the most important thing isn't what just happened to me. So if you keep sucking your thumb and dwelling on that, then you're gonna fall behind, because the world moves fast.
And speaking of both brands and trusting those around you, like I've heard the story about when you were at an Iowa intensive camp and you were going through like 5 workouts a day, and somebody who was only going through like 2 from Kansas, I think, beat you or something, and Brands put his arm around you after. Like,
Yeah.
you can't let that, mean much to you. What did it mean when you started developing that relationship with Brands, like your coach in high school, Hildebrand, who you had that relationship with? Like, I feel like that's something so many people crave, is good, healthy relationship with coaches that they can trust. What did it mean to go to Iowa and continue to have that level of trust in a coach where you can keep surrounding yourself with people who you know are the best thing for you?
Yeah, it's I don't know if I'm actually going to answer that question. I don't know if I know how to answer that question exactly, but it's a two-way street. It's not just a mentor, coach athlete. In the beginning it is, right? So
Yeah.
in the beginning it was, Tom put his arm around me saying, "Hey, don't sweat it. It's not a big deal. It's camp or practice."
Yep.
But as you get older, as you develop through that relationship, it becomes more of a relationship. So I kind of think about, like a parent. When you're young, your parent kind of coddles you, protects you, looks over you.
Yep.
There's not a lot you can give back to your parent.
Right.
But as you get older, you start developing. You're learning from them. You start giving back to them. So you start to meet in the middle. And
Yep.
so I've kind of had a growing process, between me and my coaches and the program, where a lot was given to me in the beginning, and now it's starting to kind of meet in the middle, where there's more give and take, where I'm giving some and they're taking some, or
Sure.
you see what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
it's always evolving. And so just having that trust in not only your coaches but also yourself, knowing that there's a lot of worth in me.
Yep.
So
Totally.
yeah.
And then, going to Iowa, like, it's funny because so many people think if you have a good coach or you have this, like, there's not the amount of adversity you have. And I think you've always had adversity publicly and you've dealt with it really well. Like, I know you're, losing to Clark early on at the Luther Open for the starting spot was devastating to you, but you maintain the proper perspective of, like, he's the guy. He beat me. He's got the spot. Like, I want the best for him. Did having those relationships with your coaches help develop that perspective? Like, that's not that you're anytime somebody's in college, you're 18 to 22, you're young, you're emotional. Like, it takes time to develop that proper perspective, and you seem to have nailed it early on. Like, what was it that helped instill that in you to have that perspective of, like, okay, especially now where it's like somebody loses a wrestle off and they're in the transfer portal and they're gone. Like, there's no loyalty or nothing. You kind of took the high route of, like, yeah, he beat me, but number one, I'm not done, and number two, I'm going to support him in the interim. How did you keep that kind of perspective?
I think it started long before I got here to college. I think it just tells you what kind of person you are,
Yep.
shows you what kind of person you are. You can't. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team, right? We're all teammates. We all want the same thing. I want to make you better. You want to make me
Yep.
better. That just kind of simplifies it a little bit, but I don't know. I think it's just really just comes down to what kind of person you are. If because I think about it, I still wrestle with this. I wrestled with it, in 2019 when
Sure.
when Fix is wrestling the worlds. It's like, am I gonna sit here and sit on my thumb, suck
Right.
on my thumb, and want him to lose because he beat me? And then those dots do come to your
Right.
head. But you got to wrestle with those. And it's like, is that really the kind of person I want to be? Is that how I want to be judged? And so, no, I don't want to be that kind of person. So those are the kind of, you got to wrestle with those things and just kind of step back and realize that, it's making me a better person. He was better than me on that day and
Yep.
on that match and period. And, so what? get better. That's all it comes down to. I can't bring him down or try to tear the program down or whatever just because I didn't get my way. That's pretty selfish of me.
And sadly, you do see it a lot. Like, you see the poor sportsmanship, and wrestling's a brutal sport. So, like, I can't sit on the sidelines and judge anybody for anything, but I do have that appreciation for when somebody acts like that, and they acts like you did, and takes the high road there. And another time that I think was really cool was, and it's not only cool because I can relate to it, but I'm curious in the perspective in it of, after you lose to Cruz at NCAAs, you wanted to right the wrongs, but you had to let it go. Like you said to yourself, okay, I'm never going to be an NCAA champ. And I feel like so many times great stories get told after the fact, and you're telling it in a time where it's now 3-4 years ago, and it's such a small piece of time. But when you're in it, there's those days where minutes feel like hours.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do then that helped you not get sidetracked? Like, I know your story, so I know, like, you read a lot of books, you visit a lot of coffee shops, rode your bike. Like, I know those, like, activities, but again, when you're in it, those minutes feel like hours. How did you maintain that perspective? Because you had it at that point, but it's so easy to get distracted by what other people say or what other people think you should be doing, or holding yourself to a standard that maybe doesn't exist because you just think this. How did you continue through, like, those, whether it's the first couple days or weeks, whatever that time period is, of maintaining that perspective in the moment?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to, like you said, like, right away, and just kind of throwing a little tidbit in there. Tom Brands always says, you are your own best coach.
Yep.
So what does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? What does that mean to people listening? To me, after, suffering a loss or some kind of adversity, routine. So you got to stick with your routine.
That's how I am. Yep.
Follow your routine, no matter what, win, lose, draw. You gotta get in your routine. So, just using that Cruz loss as a example or reference point, there was nothing that changed in my routine after I lost that match. Whether I won that match or lost that match, I came off the mat, I cooled down, I did what I needed to do, I cut my weight. Somewhere in there, there's a time where you have to kind of find a spot to be alone and just let it go, just because it's an emotional process. You got to give yourself 5 minutes. So at 5 minutes, I'm going to sulk. I'm going to just cry like a baby and feel sorry for myself. But after that, we're back to business. And so just staying in that routine and just doing what is right. Because everyone knows what's right. Even in the moment when you're seeing red with fury and anger, but just following your routine, talking yourself through the situation.
Yeah, and speaking of routine and the development process, I'm also curious of, you've developed such a strong personality, and I know you said that, like, going into Iowa you were really shy. What do you think helped bring out the personality and not kind of hold yourself back from a shyness standpoint? I think because your personality has come out, and there is that love me or hate me, even though both I believe and you believe more people love you. What was it, or was there anything even specific that kind of allowed you to let go and not be so shy anymore, especially those early years going into Iowa?
I think just putting myself out there more. I've always kind of been like an introvert and whatever, but just like kind of I do have a lot of things to say, and I have a lot of things to act on, and I just started kind of saying them, and then one thing led to another, or one interview led to another interview, and it just kind of, I was like, this is kind of fun, just kind of putting myself out there and voicing my opinion, because, even now sometimes, I bite my tongue maybe when I shouldn't, and say things when I shouldn't, so it's a learning process, but just it's kind of been a fun experience for me, just kind of putting myself out there and seeing what happens.
And you have had those your fair share of moments that were like viral, right? Like jumping into the Minnesota corner, or where Piccinini tells you like, see you at Nationals, and you're like, you don't want to see me at Nationals. All these little like these nuances of stories. What goes through your mind kind of after the fact? Is there that like, I'm curious because you just said like you feel good after the fact because you're letting your personality out. You're kind of you're letting yourself be more of you. Is it that you got it off your chest so you feel great, or is it more often than not, I shouldn't have said that? Like, what's the balance of that?
I think it's kind of both. So in situations like that, like with some people think like everything's like an act, or it's like
right, that it's a character you're playing. Right.
Like I have this persona that I need to live up to, but
right,
it's not anything like that. So with the Piccinini thing or the Minnesota going on the bench, it's not I don't have this persona that I'm trying to live up to,
right.
Especially then, I was in the development of my persona, if anything. So,
right.
I just, everyone knows the sport of wrestling, you're fired up. It's a fight, you versus another guy, and you're into it with your teammates, and it's us versus them, and it's a battle, right? So there's all this emotion that builds up, and you just act. You don't really think, you just act. And then sometimes, I look back, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if that was like very cool to do, but you don't think about it in the moment. You just do it.
Do you have a favorite moment of like that? Like, it's not a persona, but if you had a favorite persona moment, do you have like a favorite?
I don't know. There's so many things that I don't remember that people bring back to me just because but it's probably my senior year at Minnesota, because I kind of got in this routine of running across the mat to shake hands because they call your name, you run out there and you stand out there for however long like an idiot, and you wait for the guy to come meet you in the middle to shake your hand, and then you go back to your corners.
Yep.
And I'm just like, I don't feel like standing out there. It wasn't anything against anybody. I just didn't feel like standing there. I wanted to get out there, shake hands, go back, because 125 pounder, most times you're up first. So I want to get back, get my routine, and get ready to go. And if I could do that a little bit quicker, I was going to do it. And so I started doing that, and then it kind of turned into, a little bit of a psychological warfare thing where I'm gonna take the mat, and I'm gonna run across there. I'm not gonna give you the opportunity to come out. And then so then it kind of turned, kind of developed, from like an anxiety thing into like a confidence thing in the psychological warfare. And then in Minnesota, they got all worked up about it. They were pushing me and whatever, and the guy wouldn't shake my hand, and it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, it's showmanship.
Yeah, I like it. A little showmanship, a little emotion.
Right.
Not just your typical play, right? Because some guys I think are too nice.
Totally.
It's like they say the right things, they do the right things, which you got to be respectful, you got to be a sportman, but at the same time show a little personality and let your emotion come out sometimes. Not too much, but a little bit. And then Lezak, man, he was whipping me. And then that whole crowd, they're really fired up. They're really thinking they're gonna have something for to
was that party. The one when he said that like his coach said like you only have 7 takedowns? He's got to take you down 7 times to win or something like that?
He said, don't worry, he's got to take you down 7 times to beat you.
Takedown.
Pin. Yeah, and I'm not very good at math, so I was like, thanks for doing that math for me. I have to get 7. But I think they forgot about the fall.
Yeah.
In wrestling, you can put them in knockout punch. But anyways, that's probably.
Yeah, that was an awesome moment. And speaking to the psychology of it all, I'm curious too. So going back, or kind of fast forwarding, I guess, a little bit to, you were talking about, I think in the Flow film, about how you thought Ramos was like stressed watching the mini tournament, or you heard that he was stressed watching the mini tournament. I'm curious of, number one, do you think it's not as big of an advantage as people make it out to be to sit out? And then let's talk about that first, then I'll get to the next one. Do you think it's not as big an advantage to sit out?
I think that people make it a bigger advantage than it is. It's definitely an advantage,
Right.
but I don't think it's as big of an advantage as people think. It kind of depends on who you are.
Yep.
You know, some guys do better if they can just go out and go 2-0 and that's it. You know,
Yep.
the less the better. They can just maybe their physiques are different. They don't like the wear and tear on their body, or their body can't handle 6-7 matches in a day back
Right.
then. But I don't know. I think like where I'm at mentally, if I'm sitting out, it's an advantage for me because I'm fresh. I'm good to go. Mind's
Yep.
fresh, body's fresh. If I have to go through the tournament, it's an advantage for me because I'm warmed up, ready to go. I'm a durable guy.
Yep.
I probably do better after I have 3 or 4 matches under my belt. That saddle's warm. We're ready to rock and
Yep.
roll. So it just kind of depends on where you're at mentally.
And I'm curious too in the second part of that. I think there's, or maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm curious what it could be. The parallel between sitting out for a tournament where you're sitting the finals, and I know you've talked about how much you can get on a roll and get momentum. And I'm curious of the parallel of when you take more time off than not. Like last year, after Final X, you probably had more time off than normal. And you're coming into this year probably feeling more fresh than you've been. And I'm curious on that parallel between having more time off in a year and being kind of fresh. Like you've gone all over the place and you by no means like took time off. But if you're not on the world team, you just by default have more time to do whatever. Do you think you use that time as a benefit to the right before the Olympic year?
I think so. For me, I sound like I'm a crazy person, but for like whatever situation I'm in is best for me because
That makes sense. I get that.
That's just the way it is. I would have it no other way. I would not. If I could go back and change things, I would not want to be the world team member last year. As crazy as that sounds, because that's not what was meant to be.
Right.
So I think I needed that time between Final X and now, let's say,
Yep.
to get my mind right and my body right. And I think I was doing a lot of just maintenance, between January of 18 until Final X of 19. There's one major incident that happened in there where it was just kind of set me back and it was just maintenance, right? I was just trying to stay up with the flow and I needed that break to kind of like stop and reset and say, hey, we can't just keep keeping up. We gotta take a break and we gotta reevaluate and we gotta improve and we gotta improve exponentially because there's X, Y, and Z that I need to do and get better at if I'm going to be an Olympic champion. And if I get better at those, I will be an Olympic champion. If not, I won't be.
Right.
So it's a good time for reflection and kind of re-gearing towards something bigger.
And I'm curious, too, with that time off and that time of maintenance and reflection, you've had your fair share of big moments that are talked about. And I know I've never been in the spotlight, but on a small scale, I love when things happen, hopping on social and joining the conversation a bit or seeing what's going on. And you've never really wanted that. Did you ever get curious of like, what are people talking about? Not from the standpoint of like, what do they think of me, but just like, if I release an episode of the podcast, I want to hear what people liked or didn't like. I want to kind of use social as like a sounding board. Did you ever kind of get curious and want to hop on social during any of those bigger moments or downtime? Either way, like I know you haven't really been on social.
Yeah.
And, it is what it is. But have you ever wanted to get on, especially maybe during those moments or during the downtime of things?
I really haven't. I've never had like that itch to kind of get on there or have someone else look on there for me because I don't have a profile or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know. I think the biggest thing for me, just going way back to when I was a freshman in college, having a conversation with Terry Brands, like, it's just, for me, it's always kind of been a little bit of a distraction.
Yep.
It's just like one more thing in your life that just, and it's kind of clutter, it's not a necessity. It's like kind of anymore like a cell phone. You have to have a cell phone. You just got to it. The way our world moves fast. But social media, you don't really need it, So it's just one thing that was maybe a distraction as I got, more into school and more into my education. I could fill that void with, reading and books and quality time with people I love and having conversations instead of flipping through my phone and seeing what people are talking about. It just was never a necessity for me. And beyond that, I figured people were talking more smack than I'd like to hear anyways, and I'm a guy that would get on there and probably fire back at them, and it just wouldn't be probably very beneficial for anybody. So
has it changed recently as you start to, once you graduate college, you kind of transition from you're obviously training the same amount, but you now have to worry about your livelihood and making money and building a brand. Does building the brand, and you work so hard, and college wrestlers especially have so much relevance that I feel like even if you win the Olympics, it's hard to maintain that relevance, and so many are trying to capitalize off the relevance they have right now to set themselves up in the future. Does that start to change at all how you think, like, maybe I should do this? If not, like, I know for me, I never got on social because I cared. I started my company in 2008, and I started a Facebook like 6 months later because I saw, okay, people are using this. I can reach people for free. It was a business tool. And since then, I've definitely, I think it's net positive, no matter how much negative there are. But do you start thinking about the brand side of it now that you're into that portion of your career?
Yeah, 100%. So it's funny, my fiance has brought this up multiple times throughout the years, saying, hey, because she has social media, and the Instagram is the big one. But, you see guys on there and they post about whatever, and then they get something for free, or they get sponsorship, or like you're saying, like building that brand. And I've talked to some individuals, about the social media, and it is appealing in that aspect, just kind of from a business perspective and a brand perspective, just kind of.
Do you think at that point it would distract you, or do you think at that point you could kind of separate the two? Like, are you afraid to dive in from the brand standpoint because you don't want to get distracted on the personal, like, competition side?
I don't think. I think I just get nervous because it's new, right? So
yeah.
I know. I think I'd have to have a plan, like a plan, and have somebody help me.
Sure.
With my fiance, and just kind of figure out what the best thing for me is, because I don't want to like make one and like be on there all the time.
Right.
And so I mean, I'm not like a hardliner. I'm not against it.
Right.
I don't like you said. I think it's made probably net positive from a business perspective, as long as it doesn't become a distraction, as long as it stays business and not personal.
And where do you see the Gilman brand evolving to? Like, have you given much thought? Like, so many wrestlers, I'm curious. They're, some know they want to go coaching. Some I think they think that their brand is all contingent on success or failure. Like, have you given much thought to the big picture on where you want the Gilman brand to go?
I mean, I haven't really thought about that. I think, I don't know. I mean, the brand kind of thing is it's a funny thing to think about for me.
Right.
I'm a humble guy. I come from humble roots. If people were talking to me about a brand 10 years ago, I'd be like, you're crazy, in a brand. But I don't know. I don't think, I used to think that, like, my worth was set just in my winnings and losings.
Yep.
To a certain extent it is, obviously, but
of course.
I don't think my worth as a person is tied up in that anymore. That's kind of how I've grown, is if I lose this tournament, if I lose this or lose that, it doesn't, maybe it makes my worth go down a little bit. People aren't going to pay as much money to hear me talk, or come coach here, coach there, but my worth as a person, that doesn't go down. It probably goes up because I learn a lot more from that. But I don't know, my brand, think about my brand. I'm a very unique person.
Totally.
It's not tied to just the sport of wrestling. There's so many things that I'm interested in outside of the sport. I'm looking in my backyard here. I got my chickens and my garden and all this stuff. I could really expand this pretty far beyond the sport of wrestling, I think.
And that's one reason that I've always, I've talked to some people that are adamantly against social and are adamantly for it. And me being in marketing for a living, I see what makes it net positive, and not everybody can always get there. But like somebody like you, if somebody's not working on their brand or they're not sharing the other components to their life, like you love gourmet coffee, you love reading, you love your girlfriend's fiance's dog, like all these things, there is so much more to athletes than just a sport. And I think social media allows us to share that, right? Like if you have all these other things, how many people know you have chickens in your backyard, right? Like social does allow us to kind of share those things. And that's why I'm always curious, because like you said, wrestling is a very humble sport. Most wrestlers, like now it's a little bit different where kids are coming up and they have tens of thousands of followers. And I think it's kind of a different world where you start thinking you can be influential or be an influencer, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm curious about where that goes in the next 5 to 10 years because I know like when Lee was on the podcast, he was the same thing. It's like, no, not really interested in it. I'm on it, but my girlfriend tells me to post more, and that's it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes because everything's moving so fast in this world anymore. So
right. And speaking of moving fast, changing gears a little bit here. Next week, you go to Italy, get back on the map. How are you feeling? What are you looking forward to most about going to Italy to compete?
The weather. Nah, just kidding. I'm looking forward to the weather in Krasnoyarsk. I'm going from Rome to Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, yep. Russia. So I've been following the weather. It's hovering right around zero, a little below. So I'm looking forward to the weather there.
Didn't you just win like a fur coat the last time you were over there?
Yeah.
Are you bringing that?
Oh, that would be hard to pack. It's funny. It's a little big, so I'm kind of a shorter guy, so it's kind of stiff, so it stands up off my shoulders a little bit. So it'd be hard to get on the plane in that sense. But yeah, I'm looking forward to competing. I'm feeling good. It'll be scratch weight, so that's good. Good deal there. Get to see some different opponents. There's 3 of us Americans going, and if you count Michich as an American, which I don't, then there's 4.
Let's talk about that real quick. What do you think about when guys go and compete for different countries? I don't like it. I hate it. I'm adamantly against it.
They should try them for treason.
Yeah.
That's what I think. But I'm in that sense. I bleed red, white, and blue. And if I'm gonna fight for somebody, it's gonna be for America. If not, then if you want to fight for somebody else, go live there.
Right.
Don't reap the benefits of our country and our nation, and represent another flag. That's how I think.
Right.
And they should try for treason. For all I care, I think it's good for the sport. Blah blah blah. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't. That's my opinion. So.
And what is the trip like? Like knowing you have 3 Americans going, and you have Fix going, Cologne, who is a world team member. What's it like when you're in essence on a trip with these guys, and you're all going to compete against each other, and you all obviously have the confidence that you're going to make the Olympic team, and that's why you're going to a ranking series event, right, to get seeding points. What's the approach going into it like when hey, this guy's got the same goal, and obviously it's the same domestic, but I feel like there's something more to it when I see USA versus USA overseas. I feel like it almost becomes harder, not to be friendly, but I just don't know what it's like to travel with somebody that you're going to be competing with. Yeah,
there's a certain degree of awkwardness, maybe.
Yeah.
The normal individual, but I think it's just business. it's what it comes down to. It's business, and you know what? That guy standing across from me on that line is trying to take my livelihood. So when you put it in perspective like that, it's you just take care of business, and you put your blinders on and you take care of what you need to take care of, and whatever that guy's doing, I mean, he's probably doing it the best he can too. So you just worry about yourself. I don't think about things like that too much. You do, you see him, whatever, but it'd be no different than going to the U.S. Open,
Right. Well, and that's the thing too. Like one of the best guys at the weight aside from you is Spencer, and you guys are in the same room. Like, I'm assuming that it's the same perspective. Like, this is business. We both want the spot. We don't have to hate each other. It's business.
Yeah, you take care of yourself. You start worrying about other people, then you're not worrying about yourself. So I just try to worry about myself and take it one step at a time.
Yeah, for sure. So before I let you go here, I'm just curious, we're in that 90-day window right now where within 90 days, the Olympic team will be set. Are you doing anything different, or is it going back to what you said after the loss, right, where it's like routine kind of gets you through? Is it the same thing now leading up to a monumental event like the Olympic trials where it's just I'm doubling down? I mean, I'm sure you're 100% focused, so you can't double down, but is it that same thing where like it's just routine more than ever?
I think for me at this point, it's just being relaxed in my mind, my training, and not getting too worked up and too uptight. Just kind of having, I mean, as I'm saying this, I need to, practice a little more, but just being relaxed and keeping avenues of communication open with the people that are closest to me and the ones I love the most, because sometimes
Sure.
Before I go off and do something stupid and lose, doing something stupid like losing, I usually start pushing people away and I get a little too ornery, and then I come home and my fiance says, well, I could have told you that was going to happen,
Yeah, it's self-awareness, which is hard.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people are self-aware.
No, and just being humble enough to listen to those around me when they're saying, hey, you need to chill out a little bit or whatever. So just kind of just taking time to take a step back and look at the whole picture and not pushing the people away that are trying to help me the most.
And do you have more of a perspective now? Like we kind of talked early on in the podcast, and I guess to bring it full circle, like, are you enjoying this process? Like, and is that what part of being relaxed means? Is you're going to, obviously talk about this for the rest of your life, win, lose, or draw. Is there that element of stepping back and enjoying this process of right now I'm an Olympic hopeful, I want to be an Olympic champion, and, these next 8 months, like all that unfolds. Is there that self-awareness to be able to say I'm going to enjoy this process and not just like say it from a cliche standpoint, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, but few people actually enjoy that process. Like, are you able to enjoy part of this process?
Yeah, I think, I got a couple thoughts here. You
Sure.
have to enjoy it. You got to, something that we, Terry Brands has been talking with the team a lot, starting last year through now, just having a process goal and enjoying that process. If you're sitting there sucking your thumb, you're not enjoying the weight cut.
Yep.
You got to take a step back and say, what am I doing it for then? Because that's part of the process. That's part of the sport. That's part of your life. You got to, in a demented kind of way, you got to enjoy those late nights where you're going to go in
You
for a
have
run,
to.
drill and sauna and cut that weight. So you have to be able to step, like if you're feeling sorry for yourself, step back and say, well, why am I doing it then? And yeah, you have to.
And are you constantly evaluating those process goals in? Like, I'm imagining a process goal would be more short term. So you're constantly evaluating, is it working? Yeah. Is it not? Like, how is that a very often self-aware process?
Yeah, it's an everyday thing, going into practice, you got to have an objective. And then you can't just go into practice willy-nilly, just kind of throwing your hat in the ring and putting in the time. It's got to be focused time. It's got to be focused energy, you know? So having that objective every single day, and it doesn't mean you're going to accomplish your objective, but you're moving towards something. And so you're not just shooting aimlessly, just punching the air, so just enjoying the process that way. And it makes it easier sometimes, when you have a daily goal. You wake up and like, okay, here's my goal for the day. You know, this is what I get accomplished. You know, if you don't get it accomplished, no big deal. You're still moving in the right direction.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's where I would get hung up, right? As if I had a goal for tomorrow, and maybe it's some kind of business goal, and you don't hit it. I feel like a lot of people get hung up in that specific goal, and then they don't hit their goal on Thursday, and on Friday they don't get out of bed, right? So I guess you got to kind of learn to roll with the punches, and like you said, you're still moving in the right direction.
Right. Yeah, I think it's all about just moving. You know, sometimes the hardest thing is just to move. You know, there's a Chinese proverb that says the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So you got to have that. You got to have that 1,000-mile journey in mind. You got to have that final destination in mind, but you got to take it one step at a time. You're not going to go, you know, if you look at your life and your journey, if I look at the Olympic Games as a whole, you know, that's pretty daunting. That's intimidating. You know, I look at this field, you know, with all these tough international competition and domestic guys, you know, that's a daunting task. But if I break it up one day at a time and one practice at a time, you know, it's pretty easy that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, man, I'm sure you got to get some rest, read a couple books before you head out next week to Italy. I wish you the best of luck over there. And hope everything goes well, man.
Appreciate that.
Of course, man. And that is today's show. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to subscribe. Go back to the archives. There are dozens and dozens of NCAA World and Olympic champions that you can hear their stories of. So, again, be sure to subscribe. Check back soon for more episodes, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
And the beat goes on.